computer. So welcome everybody to our fourth class on Premiere Plus 2. Tonight's lesson will be appropriate for owners of Premiere Plus 2 Embroidery, Premiere Plus 2 Extra, and Premiere Plus 2 Ultra. If you have the free software or the intro and you just want to see what's available in more advanced software, you are welcome to join us. I am trying to work on the view. I should be pinned for everybody. Can anybody tell me if you are not seeing me full screen?
I just see the store logo, honey.
Well, but it's full screen.
Well, no,
It's a little square.
but that's just the way I have it view, I think.
Okay.
I have the speaker view full screen. There.
Okay. So if you are having trouble seeing exactly what I'm doing, if you go change your view to speaker view, and I am pinned, so I should be primary, and there should be a way to spotlight myself, but I can't find that tonight because, you know, we love technology. And as good as I want this to be,
I'm still seeing you, just your store logo. So what?
that's fine. You're not going to see me. You're just going to get the logo.
Oh, okay. All right.
You don't really want to see me. You guys don't really want to see me, do you?
Your hair looks nice.
Your hair looks nice. Okay, fine.
I'm just saying.
Fine. If you have not seen me, you get to see all my brightness. So hi, welcome. We're gonna go back to not seeing me anymore. Much better that way. Okay, so let's go to my main computer screen. So we have the screen now.
Yes.
Okay, and not me. That is lovely. I'm going to stop my video so I don't have to look at myself. So this is my reminder for the computer for tonight. Let's go ahead and minimize that. And I already have Premiere Plus 2 loaded. But what I really want to do is go ahead and open Configure first. It is up to you if you follow along, but the way we work this process is so that your screen looks like my screen. If you are just listening in for right now, that's perfectly fine. I also want to tell everybody I have a drinking problem this evening. I have 3 drinks.
All different.
All different kinds. 1 hot, 2 cold. Yeah, I was thirsty and got one of everything. So I'm going to go to Configure, which is not the button that I just pushed, but Configure is this little icon on the bottom of my, not that one, on the bottom toolbar that says Premiere Plus 2 with my lovely Zoom controls in my way. Y'all, where'd you go? Premiere Plus 2 Configure. There we go. And in Configure, I am going to reset all modules. And what that does for me is it allows me to make sure that kind of all of my settings go back to manufacturer's default. Now, if you have gone in and been very specific and fine-tuned your settings to your computer screen, you may not want to do this because this will override all of your settings. If you want to follow along, you can go ahead and go to backup my settings first and then reset for tonight and then restore afterwards. And I know that's a lot of confusion, so I apologize if it is too much to follow. And if we're staying 25 people or less in class, we're 33. We should still be okay if you want to unmute. And I'll just shut everybody down if we need to. Yes,
I was going to say it's just then that speaker view goes away from the phone.
I should be pinned though. We're going to try. Or stay on mute and use chat. Barbie is definitely here. So even if Karen needs to leave, she'll let us know before she does that. And then Barbie can monitor chat as a worst case. So by resetting all modules, what that does is it takes me back to all those factory settings. It closes everything. This is also my get out of jail free button. Occasionally I lose something or it goes somewhere weird. And so now I'm going to relaunch my Premiere Plus 2 module. Now I am working with a not for sale copy, which means this is the version that dealers have available. And you see at the top that it says not for sale. Depending upon which software you have, it may say just Premiere Plus 2 embroidery. Extra may or may not say extra. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure. And what that does is it just takes us all back so we've got the same thing on the screen. From here, let's go ahead and change our hoop. So we're going to go to the change hoop icon on the ribbon toolbar. And we're going to go ahead to our universal hoop group. We work with universal in class a lot because we realize that people own software from multiple brands. But if you would like to go ahead and pick your machine, what I will tell you is that we are working with a 200 by 200 hoop tonight. So if your machine does not accommodate a 200 by 200 and you pick your machine, we can run into that. If we want to stay within the Husqvarna Viking line, the Applique 2, Brilliance 80. And I'm going to pause for a second on this Ruby. There is a new Ruby 90. And it is, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but it's basically the original Applique relaunched in red and white. Barbie likes her blue one better. So
It's pretty.
it's a nice looking machine. I will also, I'll get in trouble for telling you this too, but I will also mention that there is a new 5-thread air serger on the FOF side right now, and it's pretty impressive. I hear tell that Viking may have one coming, but not until the fall. So if you are bound and determined to get one and your dealer carries both, I will tell you it's not going to be any different. Oh, did I say that out loud? As far as I know, it's not going to be any different.
Just
But
the body.
I'm not even sure that the body's going to be different, honestly.
I'm not sure you're a good salesman right now.
Sorry. Well, I
The
mean, I sell
FOF one's
both.
pretty.
I sell both. So I've told all my Viking people if they want it now, they can buy the FOF. But we're going to go to Universal Square Hoop 3, which is our 200 by 200. Now, this doesn't matter so much if I go to my orientation of natural or rotated. So for the interest of making sure that my design saves the way it's going to look on my machine, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's set to natural. But I am quickly going to show you two things. One is this included in my hoops. I am not a fan of that control anywhere. I'm not a fan of the hoop manager on the machines. I'm not a fan of it in the software. And the reason is that sometimes a hoop is coming up a lot for us. And if I've restricted the number of hoops that my software or my machine can read, it's not telling me repeatedly that, hey, this might be a size hoop that I might want to have. So I generally recommend that people do not use those functions. I understand the desire to have the machine default to the hoops that you own. The thing that we run into is if your hoop is bigger, you end up wasting stabilizer and you don't get as good of a quality of stitch when we do that. So I'm going to mention that. And then I'm going to go down here to enter hoop size for just a minute. Now, if I have a machine that isn't included in software, I can absolutely plug in whatever size hoop I need. But I use this a lot when I'm working on things that I need to fit in a specific space. So if I wanted to embroider on maybe a satin ribbon that was 1.5 inches wide, I may go ahead and put that in as 1.5 inches. Oops, that's not the button I wanted. Backspace. And let it create a spacing that's a specific size. That just allows me a visual. I can stitch the design in anything that's that size hoop or bigger, but it does sometimes help me to restrict the the sizing of something I'm working on. And I don't know that that's covered in an instruction anywhere. So since we're here, I'm just mentioning it. So universal, hoop 3, make sure I'm on natural and okay. So we'll go back to that big square.
Can I ask a question?
You sure can.
If I were to do that, the example that you just showed, knowing that I was gonna sew on something, embroider on something small, by changing that hoop size, does it then automatically default that to be like the center position later, or am I still gonna have to manually adjust where my needle falls within the hoop?
So if my center point of my design is at the center point of, because we can, in some designs, you can move the center point, but as long as my center point is center, it should then load centered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I just like it. I find it can be really helpful because I'm very visual, and having to keep like look at the grid or count or measure drives me sort of crazy. If I go, okay, you have to fit within, it's like packing your suitcase. If you have your suitcase out and you go to pick out your clothes, then you know how much space you have to put your clothes in, unless you're me, and then you pack like 3 suitcases for 4 days, but that's a whole other problem. So from here, we're going to go ahead and look for some designs on the machine, on the computer. And this is going to be very similar to what I showed you last time, but a little bit different. So we can look for designs a couple of different ways, depending upon kind of our computers and what versions of Windows we have. If you have the Windows button on your keyboard, you can press the Windows button and then hold that down and press the E button. And that brings up a Windows Explorer. I'm going to close that. You can also go to File and Open. And then I can browse this way. And I can also go to the insert icon on the very top toolbar. So more than one way to skin a cat, whichever way you would like to do that. And since you have instructions, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to go to insert, which tends to be my preferred way. And I think that's what Karen said as well.
Always.
And what we're looking for is under documents. So I'm going to expand that by clicking on that little arrow. So you see my arrow changes from an arrow pointing to the right to an arrow pointing down. Oops, except that's desktop, not documents. And then Premiere Plus 2. And then I'm going to mention something that we ran into last week, 2 weeks ago. I don't know, the last time we were here. So under samples, I'm going to mention that there are, under Premiere Plus 2 EMB, there are these 4 folders, pics and script. This was something that Barbie had been having trouble with. She couldn't open a design last time, and it wasn't until after class that we figured out what was going on. And it was that she was looking in the pics folder and not the stitch folder. So I know a couple of you ran into that, and we are guessing, because of course, we found it out afterwards, and I forgot to put it in the email, that we want to be sure and go into stitch. So we're going to go into the stitch 2 and then flowers. Okay. And here I have all of my names. So I need to know what I'm looking for at this point. Okay. And this is why the instructions went kind of the other direction, because I could preview those. Now, I need more than one design. And what I'm looking for are the red daisies. So this is in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to my R. I've got quite a few red daisies. If I don't have words that make a whole lot of sense to me, I can change my view to my icons. Okay, so we know some companies, their identifiers are a bunch of weird letters and numbers, and it doesn't mean boo. And so what we want is the corner. So I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to use the control button on my keyboard and press and hold that down. And then I can go ahead and select Red Daisy centered as well. So I want to work with these two. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do exactly what I'm doing. This way, I'm going to bring these in and open. Okay. And so what this does is it allows me to bring multiples into the screen. Remember, we talked before about if we went to File and Open, that will only allow me to open a single design at a time. Okay. And I want to see what these look like, so I'm just going to kind of move them around a little bit. And this looks sort of familiar. Last time I worked with corners in my sort of little, let me show you. And it turns out that we're still working with corners. If I want to see what the design looks like, I want to get a preview of kind of how this is going to appear in real life. We do have a design player and a life view up here. So we want to make sure that you're familiar with those. Design player allows me to literally play through a design and how it will stitch. And I'm pretty sure Karen showed this in a previous class, and it goes slow, so I can make it go faster and faster and faster because I'm impatient. And this is also where I can go to this little USB icon here, and I can share the picture, but you can also share a video with someone. So if you want to say to somebody else that you know, what do you think about how these are stitching out? A picture is only so good, but video really helps those of us who understand what a design is, how they're built, and we can see the process. So if I wanted to share the picture with someone and say, is this what you wanted? Go ahead and share it as a picture. But if I wanted to send this to another embroiderer, I can share the video. And I think it's Laurel's time to go. Did we put close the windows? Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much, young lady. I'll see you next week. Okay. Sorry about that. So now within this window, I also can make this bigger or smaller if I need to. So this is just a standard windows. We can kind of drag things in and out. Larger obviously allows us to see a little more detail as we're going. And if I go through this again, what I want to be sure is that my designs are stitching in kind of the order that I want them to. So what I really want to be sure is that my corner stitches first, which it did. So that's also a really good place to see how Design Player works. Now, if I wanted to switch those, I could. And we can do that in just a second. And how they load really depends upon, most cases, how you click them. If I select the corner first, and then I select the single, but sometimes, because we love Bill Gates and Microsoft, sometimes they kind of flip backwards. So I'm going to cancel this. And if I need to change the alignment, so if you're horizontal stitched first, and I apologize, I'm trying to move all the controls for Zoom around on my screen. From here, if I want to move them, I can select the one that I want. And I'm going to go to my layout order, which is up here on the top toolbar. Can everybody see my cursor? You made it pink.
Yeah.
Easier to see. And so layout order allows me to move designs forward and backward. Now, right now we only have one. So it's either in the front or it's in the back. But if I had 5 or 6 designs, I could change the stitching order of them. So sometimes I'll go and I'll load something and I'll run it through my design player and I'll go, oh, you know what? The other one should have stitched first. Old school, we'd have to go and move them around and copy and paste and erase them and reload them. And now we can just basically shuffle the deck, which is really nice. So with that said, we want to be sure again that this one is stitching first. So if I look at my design player once more, I'm going to play. Oh, look, I got it backwards. So now I'm down here at the bottom. I'm glad I double checked that. I want to go ahead and move this one to the back. And keeping in mind that this is like a stack of paper, the first one that goes down is the back. So that sometimes is a little bit confusing. And now I'm up here in the corner. So I like to point that out because that is a front and back get a little bit, I think front is first, but in fact, back is first, my foundation. So think of building a house, the bottom goes in first. So once we have those, we're in the order that we'd like. Let's go ahead and play with, and I showed this last month, the Encore tab. So on the top toolbar, I have my file, home, wizards, and then the fourth tab over, the file is always highlighted, is my Encore tab. And from here, we're going to go ahead and Encore to the hoop. So what this means is that, and I showed this last 2 weeks ago, we're going to put this in the hoop. Okay. Standard alignment. So all of my pieces are going in the same direction. So if you look at these two layouts, mirrors means that we get 2 and 2. Now, if you want to see the difference, feel free to select mirror. And then I'm going to go ahead and lower my margin a little bit, just down to 1 millimeter. Okay. The gap over here is the space between the edge of the design and the edge of the work area. So we're going to go ahead and leave that. We want to group these together once we're done, and let's preview this. Well, that looks funny. And that certainly didn't give me frames like I would hoped it would have. And so this is not what I want. So let's go ahead and cancel that. Now that has to do with the design, how big it is, its location. I will tell you that for me, I probably would put these 4 in manually, but the instructions tell us to do it like this. So we're going to. So we're going to cancel this one. And we need to play with the rotation. So let's go back home, make sure we still have this design selected, and we're going to rotate this design 45 degrees. Now, I wouldn't have thought it did it like this, but it did. So sometimes you just have to, trust that the computer knows what it's doing. Go back to the Encore tab, leave the same settings in place, and preview my design. Oh, there we go. Now I get 4 designs in my corner. And this looks kind of like what I started to show last time. I think it's faster to put, if it's just 4, just put them in the corners. But if I'm happy with that, go ahead and say apply, and that'll basically lock everything into place. There we go. Now you'll see on the right hand side that every color is start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. So we're going to worry about that in just a second. What was the question?
Change one of them to yellow.
Oh, so it's changing the color as I hover over. See, I have a little bit of a peanut gallery tonight. So as I hover over the different colors, that helps me identify exactly where I am in the design. So if I'm happy with that, let's go back to the home page. And now we have these 4, and what you'll see is we loaded it as a group, because if I go back to that Encore page, I went ahead and made sure that it was selected as a group. When I come back here, it comes in grouped. So on my top ribbon, you see group and you see ungroup. So if I want to do something funny with maybe one of them, I can go ahead and ungroup them. But for right now, let's go ahead and leave them as group. And you'll see that we have the orange handles. These are different because this identifies that something has been grouped. And now we have the single design down in the bottom. Now I will also mention, you see these other lines in here, they're very light. The designs are in the background. each of the boxes around the designs. But because we've grouped them, that overrides everything. It just gives me sort of some parameters for that. Parameter? Is that the parameter?
Yeah.
Some days words don't sound right. So now if I want to get to this other design underneath here, my single, well, I could move this out. I could get to it. I could move this over. This is sort of old school. I don't want to do any of those things. I'm going to put things back where they were. So my tab button on my keyboard allows me to toggle between my designs. If I have 6 or 8 designs, I can just tab, tab, tab. In more recent versions of software, they've also added a previous design and a next design on the ribbon. So we get the ability to kind of do this multiple ways. But that select a design, move it off the screen is really truly what we used to have to do. And it was a pain in the bum. I have a single daisy, but I really want to go with 2. So I could do a couple things. I could copy it and paste it. It still looks like I have 1 daisy, but there are 2. I'm going to undo that and undo that and go back to my single. I can also duplicate on my top toolbar. You see where I have duplicate and duplicate offsets. So I really like duplicate as the function because then I don't accidentally forget and copy and paste a design right on top of itself and then end up trying to stitch it and wonder why my stitching is turning into a mess because it's stitching on top of where it was before. So we can go ahead and play with this. Now I'm creating a frame. I want to put a monogram or a name in the middle of it. So let's go ahead and flip one of these upside down. I'm going to move it so we can see a little bit better.
No.
Okay. Hi, Karen.
That wasn't me.
Oh, wasn't Karen. Thought it was.
No.
Okay. Sounded like you for a second. So on the left-hand side, we have an arrow. Now this isn't going to show anything right here because this design is very much the same mirrored on its own left to right, but this does a mirror image left to right. But watch what happens when I touch this arrow at the top. See how we mirror image top to bottom. So this is a real easy way to duplicate things and kind of do some mirroring without having to rotate. Now, I'm going to quickly mention rotate versus mirror. There are some imagery, some images that you want to rotate. If I want to get this back the other direction, if I rotate and rotate and rotate and rotate. So think of things like lettering. Now, if I mirror lettering, I may want it to do that because I may want it to look kind of like it's a reflection. Or if I want to be able to see it from either side, I'm hoping that makes sense to everybody. So mirror versus rotate. When something is not symmetrical, makes a huge difference. So there are times where you want to make some changes of those. So let's go ahead and select both of these pieces. So I'm going to use my control button on my keyboard. And then I'm going to click on the second. And that allows me to have them both at the same time. And now I can move these around as a group. Okay, except I didn't leave myself any room to put something in between. So I'm going to undo those controls. And I'm going to go ahead and I have a funny thing when I like to move designs around because I'm really compulsive about them being centered. So I will move something to the center of the hoop and then I'll use my arrows and I will touch and hold my down arrow until it gets to where I want it to be. If I am impatient, then I can go ahead and drag it. And again, I can use my next design or my tab button and move this around. So I want to go ahead and spread these out and make some decisions on kind of how far spread out I want them to be. Once I have them in place, control button on my keyboard, select the second design. That was not the one that I wanted. So tab, here we go, control, flower, and now they're both selected. So if you're super compulsive, I can also play with my alignment tools. These are newer to software. They were not there originally. So just kind of bear with me for a second. Let me show you. If I align them both left, well, that doesn't do a whole lot of good because I just have this perfect space and they're the same design. If I align them all on the top, well, that's not what I wanted, but all of the very top point of stitching will be the same. They'll all be at that very top row. So let's undo that. So you can play with these. What I really want to do is go to alignment, and I want to align center. And in the off chance that I'd shifted one left or right, this would bring them both to center position. So you can play with this. And here's the thing. If you're like, oh, I clicked the wrong one, your undo is up here on your top above the ribbon. So don't be afraid of making these changes. There is nothing wrong with getting it wrong because we have undo. So now if I'm happy with all of this, we're going to go ahead and group everything here, these guys. And now I get that solid line around the group. So I'm going to undo. See how I have dashes? Once I group these, I now have them in one solid group. I still have 4 color changes. Okay. And if I'm happy with this as it looks, because I know I want to put something in the middle, let's find out how much space I have in the middle. We're going to go to our View tab. So above the ribbon, all the way to the right, View. And in our View tab, I can get length. Now, I am personally someone who thinks that this get length icon should be on all of these, but it's not. And nobody listens to me. So I could stare at this and measure, but I can also just come in with get length, turn that control on, and I can click right here and come down to just above the other. And you see how I have both metric and English measurements. And whatever my default is, since I work primarily in millimeters, whatever my default is first, but the second measurement is there. And is it raining? Is that rain? Would you text Christopher and make sure he brought the laundry in? Sorry about that, guys. I know I have laundry hanging at home. Right now it's going to be really wet. Oh. Yeah, it's really, really rainy out here. So once we have that measurement, we can go ahead and say, okay, what I need to put in there will fit. Oh, you know what? It won't fit. I need to spread it out some more. If I want to spread it out some more, I'm going to go back home. And I'm just going to do a whole lot of undo. Restrict my group. Go ahead and move these. Up. And down. And then I can regroup them. So control button on the keyboard, left click on the second item, verify my alignment, and then go ahead and regroup those. Now I have a little more space. If I want to add something in the middle, let's go ahead and whichever way you brought in a design the first time, you could do the opposite or you can stick with the insert. We're going to add something to the middle. So I'm going to go ahead and insert. And this time you'll see that my computer defaults to where I was last. Stitch 2. So I'm going to go back to make sure that I'm in stitch 2. If I want to go back to Premiere Plus 2 embroidery, I would go to my sort of address bar up here. Stitch 2. And now this looks different because I changed my view to icons. And let's go to bugs and butterflies. Haven't been in this folder, so I haven't changed that view. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to medium icons. Because frankly, I can't see the small icons to save my life. And it's up to you what you'd want to insert here. The instructions call for the fancy butterfly, but you could browse through, see if there's something that you like better. I'm a fan of hot pinks, so I'm going to put the pink butterfly in. And then I can either double click on that or open. And there's my butterfly, put right into the center. Now, if I want to go ahead and change the alignment on that, I can center it in the hoop. If I go ahead and use the control key on my keyboard and then select my flowers, I could play with my alignment and make sure that they're all centered, or I could align them all right, or I could distribute them all horizontally. So you've got some alignment controls. Let's align center. And then again, let's vertical align middle. And that makes sure that everything's kind of vertically, horizontally, all in the center of where I want it to be. If I want to group these together, I can go ahead and then group those, and now they're all one big group. We can always ungroup. And then from here, if I want to grab absolutely everything, I can either sort of come out and go to, when I come out, I sort of click on something in the blank space that deactivates everything. I can select all and then group everything. I can also come and do a box select. So I could just come and drag a box around everything that's here. Maybe. I've got some controls in my way. So they may be giving me fits. So we have different ways of selecting everything. Let's go ahead and select all. That gives us absolutely everything that we want. And we can group the whole shebang. And now I've got one giant file. You can see all of the ghost frames for each of the individual shapes. If I go to the right-hand side, you'll see if I scroll up and down, all of my thread colors. Now you'll notice that these guys, these first four, red, green, that's the center. And if you remember, I said I wanted the frames to go down first. So I'm going to ungroup this. And now I've got my butterfly. I'm going to use the control button and select my center piece at top, center piece at button. I held my control button down for all of those. I'm going to group those. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the layout order and actually move them to the front. And if I then select all and group them, you see now I have the red, green of the frames. They stitch first. So it seems a little backwards when you do that, and you won't see the change until you group everything. Barbie, you got the chat up? She has two computers and a tablet in front of her. Bless her heart. And her phone?
That is your computer. That is not mine.
Oh, she's using the store computer. Okay, or she's not using it. Perfectly fine. Now from here, because I have this giant group and I have all these color changes, I may want to go ahead and leave them on, particularly if I have a machine that will color sort for me, because maybe one day I will want my flowers to be different colors on the different pieces. Or if I want to color sort them, I can go ahead in and color sort, but I can't color sort these until I've combined them. So I'm going to combine all because I selected everything. I'm going to color sort those babies. And you'll see that my green and then all the red and then the other greens. And this has come up in the past. The two greens didn't combine. Something in the software told it, even though the reds did, something in the software told it that it couldn't combine them. It happens. If that happens, then I want you to go ahead and, assuming that you have extra or ultra, we can go to the modify tab. This is not in the instructions, by the way. But if I go to modify, I can come over here to my color. Hey, Karen. They move it. I think they moved it.
Move them right
Over
there.
here. I can move the color up.
Is that second green the center of the flowers?
Oh, maybe.
Because you don't want to combine those.
Oh, let's go back home and see. She's got a very good point. Nope, it's not. You see?
The two center ones.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's-
it is
that's
those
what I
sleeves.
thought.
Okay.
That's what I thought. I looked at it, but sometimes I get it wrong. So if I go to modify underneath my colors here, and that's why I couldn't see it, it wasn't highlighted until I selected that second green.
Yeah.
I can go ahead
And then use the arrows.
manually move it up. And then I can come over here
No, go over there.
and I can merge
Right
color
hand.
blocks. Okay, so I can manually override the color sort function. If it didn't sort everything, there is an opportunity for us to do that manually. On previous versions of the software, it was actually, I think, to the left or the right of the colors. So keeping in mind that I've worked with versions of software, I sometimes have to double check where it is. Now, if I wanted to make changes, I could say, you know what, I don't want these yellows to be a different color of yellow. I want them to be whatever is over here. I can change my colors by just double clicking on whatever color it is. And I can do this in all different pieces, different tabs of the software and change my colors. I was going to do something different, but I decided not to because that would just be a little confusing. So now that this is my finished piece, for me personally, I go, oh, I might have moved those out too far. Okay. I could just undo quite a few times, or I could just leave it. For tonight, I'm just going to leave it. We looked at the player, but let's look at Lifeview. Not in the hoop. Why you're not in the hoop? Alignment, center, and hoop. Oh, I just must have moved it. Just a smidge right out of the hoop. I knew the design fit. So if I get that message, the first thing I'm going to do is go to center and hoop. Occasionally, I'll work with something and I realize that I have a design piece that is way outside of the hoop. And if we go to the bottom right here, if you see, I have these two little tabs. This one on the right-hand side shows me the hoop, but sometimes, so just for giggles. Okay. Sometimes I move something off my screen, kind of like that. And sometimes I can move it so far that I can't see it, just like that. And I will want to go ahead and go to Lifeview. And of course, this time it worked for me. Of course it did. But if I get that message that says, you know, things aren't all in the hoop, sometimes if I zoom out further, I go, oh, there's that stray little piece. I don't need that. Let's go ahead and delete that. And you can zoom out with the in and out with the plus and the minus. You can also drag that little slider bar. You can use the drop down. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts, the control button, and then all of the different numbers. Or what I prefer is this little plus sign, and that just takes me back to my hoop view. And that kind of shows me everything in my hoop. That's my preferred sort of go back to my regular screen. So back to Lifeview. What Lifeview does is it allows us to preview a design in a more realistic aspect. It takes the hoop away. It takes the grid away. It allows me to change kind of the angle that I'm looking at it from. Now this doesn't do as much for designs that are flatter, but some designs we know are created for puffy foam. Some designs are thread velvet. And so those very often will have more depth to them. I also can kind of change exactly which piece of this I'm looking at. If I have a much bigger design, I can zoom in and out. So these are all very similar controls. And then if I want to, you know, demo what I just sort of did with my scrolling about, I can show somebody kind of angles, what that might look like. This is also a great place to, I'm going to stop that. A great place to go ahead and play with the demos, change those. And so everything that we see here will allow us to kind of do something a little bit different. Now, what I don't have highlighted right now are solar active and glow in the dark. You'll see that they're not highlighted. So since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and close this out because I just want to show you again for giggles, if I change this red thread to a glow in the dark thread. So while I glow bug, these glow in the dark, this is just a white. Fine. I'm actually going to pick a different one. I'm going to pick Robus and Anton Moon Glow. And I'm going to make my flowers pink. They still look okay, but watch happens with my Lifeview. Now my little moon is active. Here's what happens with glow in the dark. And so you get a really good idea of what these look like. Now I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go to my green. And I'm going to switch over to all thread ranges. And I'm going to look for a solar active thread. And they do exist, solar active ultraviolet. These threads change with different lighting. So I'm going to pick number 5. I'm not sure that this is going to do what I want it to do because I don't know what color 5 goes to. But Lifeview. Now my sun is also active. Oh, I picked a red. I was hoping I grabbed a green. So if you've never seen threads like this, they do exist. They are both susceptible to high temperature washes and high temperature dries. So sort of keep that in mind. And if the solar actives or the moon glows sort of die out, the reaction feature of them, they just kind of remain these pastel colors. But they are some neat things to see that are out there. If you're one of our customers, we do carry the moon glows. I don't stock the solar actives, but I could probably find them again if you needed me to. They are on that place that I don't shop though. If you're somebody who shops on that place, that would be Amazon, by the way. So I'm going to go back to my original. Anybody have any questions about those basics? If I'm happy with this, I want to save it. I can go ahead and file save as. Remember that save as will make it a VP4 file, but that makes it editable, much more easily editable. If I want to go ahead and put it on my machine, file and export for most of our models. If I want to print a paper template of this because I'm using Floriani template tearaway and I want to go ahead and put it on my shirt and make sure that maybe my flowers don't end up in the wrong place when I put the shirt on. That's really simple. We can just go to File and Print. And printing will allow us to print a template. Now, while I'm here, you'll see that it didn't print the whole thing because it's trying to print it full size. So a 200 by 200 is really big and it will not print. It needs sort of some margin. So it will not print everything. So page 1, page 2, and page 3 is my color information. Okay, so I may not necessarily need the color information, but I would print page 1, page 2, and then I could tape them together. Or you could use the margin. If you're using template tearaway, it's sticky on the back. So I could use the margin of 1 where there's nothing printed and stick it on top of the other. I do that a lot with all kinds of things, including stabilizer. But I'm going to close this. So let's exit out of here. I'm going to cancel that complete close because I don't want to close out of this one. Any questions about what we did so far? You guys, this tutorial is 17 pages long. So, all right, let's
Did
go
you send
on.
it- has it
Let
been
me check the
censored?
chat just in case. Are you guys yelling at me? Barbie hasn't told me that anybody's yelling at me in chat. Chat won't show up over here. Any questions? Nope, nothing.
Karen had adjusted, but you might want to put it out. Like if you're doing the frame,
Mhm.
and you have the frame part the way you want it, to do the save as. At that point, then add your things that you want to do to another save as.
Yep, that's a very valid. Okay, so somebody in the chat had asked about saving basically in process. And it used to be that as I worked on something, I would do a save as kind of on each stage, on each layer. And you absolutely can. But that's also why the VP4s are so nice, because in a VP4 file, if I haven't, now I combined this one. If I had not combined it, so if I undo and undo and undo and undo, let's go back before I combined it. Okay, so if I do a save as at this point, and I'm in a VP4, I can edit much more easily. So I could just come in and take the centerpiece out. That's kind of the beauty of a VP4. But if you're also somebody who doesn't necessarily think that way, there's nothing wrong with saving these as, you know, two separate elements and then saving them as a combined element. A lot of our machines now come with designs where there's a combined design that's this great elaborate thing. And then they also give you all of the individual elements to give you a piece to practice on, to go ahead and do all that combining. So hang on, let's go to participants. And we are going to, oh, okay. Nope, I lost you guys, wherever the noises went. This week's lesson is up. I saw that chat. I already went ahead and put that up as a download. So, and that's just why we did that rather than charge a fee for the class. You're welcome to get something out of it. If you want the printed instructions to kind of redo at home, you can absolutely go and purchase them. They're $5 a lesson on the website. And we will email everyone after class the link to Zoom as well as the link to the lessons. All right, so let's work with another one. We're working with frames tonight. So let's go to File. And if we go to New Window, this will bring up a second tab for me so that I'll still have my first design. In the interest of not overloading my computer's memory, I'm going to go to New. It's going to ask me if I want to save what I just did. For my purposes, I'm going to say no. And then let's go ahead and go to a smaller hoop. So change my hoop, universal, but let's go down to our 120 by 120 universal square hoop 4. Again, I'm going to leave that in a natural position and say okay. And let's play with monograms. Now, the Express Monogram Wizard, I've been asked about this in one of the Facebook groups recently about monograms. So under wizards, depending upon which level of software you have, you may have more or less of the icons. I'm going to go to Express Monogram. And it's going to take a second for it to load. This is why I did not leave that previous tab up there. So let's talk about this Monogram Control here. If I drop down at the top, you can see these are kind of my different layouts. Do I want a single letter? Do I want 2 letters? Do I want 3 letters straight across? Are they all large? So you see how we have some different sort of controls. Our most common monogram is going to be small, big, and small again. In which case then I can go ahead and put in my initials. Now I am officially S and then R, and B actually is already correct for me. What do you want? It's already a B. B is also good for my first name. So if you like this trio, small, large, and then small again, then over on the right hand side I have more controls of kind of which versions of those I'd like to have. So I can play with these a little bit. Are they italicized? Are they diamond shaped? And this impacts my borders and frames as well. I do recommend that you go and play with this and see how, like the R, see how it does this funny little bump because of the funny little bump on the top of the R. So not all fonts work as well for the different types of letters. Now I can change the font. So let's go ahead and change, and you see here full letter and small letter are separate controls. So if I did this, I'd have all full letters. And I am not going by the instructions. y'all. So
If you were to make the letters themselves smaller, would that take the bump away?
I could play with it. Barbie asked, did Barbie ask her? Okay, Barbie asked if I change the size of this letter over here. So let's try that. One of these, it was much more pronounced. So let's go. Where to do? This one. Let's just go with this. So you see how I definitely have this pronounced bump. My full letter. I can drop down within my full letter and pick whichever lettering I like, keeping in mind that depending upon what level of software you have, not all of the letters may be available. So because I'm going to be difficult, let's pick the cats. And when I change that much higher, it kind of smooths out that transition a little bit. But you see how it's bigger over here than it is over here, because if I measured this, which I can't do, I did mention that I wish that measuring tool was everywhere. But if I measured this R top to bottom, I would bet you money that it is taller than this S is top to bottom. And then if my small letters, okay, and look here, I now have some more controls, alternative styles. So I can change the different font, or I can leave it be the same font. If it's the same font, that's going to be a lot smoother. But for me, I think that the cats need, apologize if I just made you dizzy there. I think the cats need, where is it? Cheese. Come on, that's funny.
Mice need cheese.
Cats, okay, cats need cheese though to catch the mice. The cats need the cheese to catch them, right? Anyway.
That R looks awful.
Well, right, that R looks awful. The B looks awful. Not the point. The point is that we can play with the different fonts. Now I can change the size, which is actually what Barbie had asked me about. So let's go back to, anybody remember what that previous font was? I don't even remember. Go to this one. Okay, we've got some bumps. So if I needed to, I could change, but here's the thing. They change together. Okay, so if I change the percentage here, they're going to change together. So it's not really going to do what I want it to do. If I really am having a moment with a particular font, I may go ahead and do it. And I've been known to then manually load a change to this. Okay, but let me look at what the instructions tell us to do now that I'm way off course. Full letter. I'm going to switch this over to something different, like the kids, just because this is a satin. Okay, but if I go to stitch type, I can make it a satin column. And this changes kind of the texture within all of this. So I get more controls. I'm not going to go into huge detail about all of this, but I just want you to know that we've got some variables here. So if you have a font, you're not thrilled with it, you're not quite sure that it looks the way you want it to, I can come in here and I can change some controls. I can change my density. I can add some underlay if it doesn't already have it. So we've got a lot more controls available, and those controls will change as the font that I choose changes, which is probably why the instructions had us pick a particular font, but I don't follow instructions real well. Okay, so stencil, this clearly has a pattern fill. Here's my pattern fill, and here's all my different patterns. So I can change the fill within that font. So I can change the way things look multiple ways. It's not always just about changing the lettering and changing the size. I can work within the existing size. Now, I'm still on my full letter. Over here to the right, the spacing is the spacing from the nearest points. it's a little funny because this looks like it's much further away from the S than the R. So I may want to go ahead and change my spacing for my R. That one looks a little far now. So again, different fonts appear differently. There's, I think, a YouTube video about, you know, having a bad monogram. I'll find it. If I can find it, I'll send it to everybody. So you do have to sometimes watch the monograms, but you also have to watch how they sort of come together, and different fonts will appear differently. So there are some, and I go, I don't know what that letter is. It says it's an L or it says it's an S, but it doesn't look like an L or an S to me. So just kind of bear in mind that that's there. So if I'm happy with whatever I've done, here's my full letter, here's my small letter. Now my last control is my border. That's that satin edge around there. Do I want it to be a border? Maybe, maybe not. You know what? These look funny with that bump. If I just take the border off, it looks a whole lot less funny. If I put the border back on, do I want the corners to be rounded or do I want them to be sharp? Well, that's worse. Rounded worked better. How much margin do I want outside my letters? And I would bet that there's a point where my margin probably smooths out that bump a little bit more. Here's my stitch types. So I just want a straight running stitch. The only way I'm using that is if I'm cutting it out. Do I want it to be a motif line? So motif lines are the same things as decorative stitches. Yep, and now I'm straightening it out just because of the thing that it was. Triple stitch looks exactly the same as a single stitch, but this is a bean stitch. It goes forward and backward and forward. And then within those, here's my motif. I have options. So this is all kinds of different stitches within the different machines and different software. So this is another piece that people don't realize is sort of hidden in software. So I can drop down for Universal, Viking, and Pfaff. So we have access to a lot of the decorative stitches that are in all of the machines. Do I want that star to be a triple stitch? It's a little bit heavier. I can play with things like my stitch length, okay, my gap, the overall height and width. So I've got more, again, more controls. Anytime you see a button that says options, or sometimes you get the drop down arrows like this one, click on it, see what it does. Until you stitch it out, you haven't really done anything. It's just playing with the computer. Now, I could add this as an applique, and that'll add my placement and my tack down. And then my finished stitch would be, in this case, the motif line. If I really wanted this to look like an applique, I might not use the stars. I might go in and use something that looks more like, and this is just because I can navigate the Viking a little bit faster. I want it to look like a blanket stitch. That's an inside and an outside blanket stitch. I want a different blanket stitch. We might be sticking with that blanket stitch. That's what I wanted. So one more like that. And here you can see that that bump sort of reappeared. If I want to see what this looks like with a particular fabric behind it, I can go in and do that. You can even upload your own fabrics if you want to. So I can change the color, or I can bring in my own fabrics manually. Okay, and that's under applique methods, standard, pre-cuts. So a lot of these more and more controls available to me. There's my thread color. We can change that. I'm not going to. I'm just going to say, you know what? I've played with this enough. I've looked at my initials or Barbie's initials or somebody else's initials long enough, and that's what we get. Now, once I've brought it back to my hoop, I can't modify it. Even if it's a VP4, I don't have the ability to go back in and have it reactivate the monogram wizard. So I just really need to start again. But this wasn't a whole lot of controls here for us. I don't think it was too overwhelming. I don't think he was beeping at me. Anything I need to be looking at, ladies? Okay.
We're gonna break it up.
Oh, is that a good idea? I think we should take a break. Okay.
Now,
It's been an hour. So let's take a 5-minute break. Let me look at, we're going to stop the share for just a second because I want to go ahead and get in here too. And we're going to pause our recording. We'll be right back. Everybody gets 5 minutes to stand up, stretch, get a drink, or drink one of the three you've got in front of you. We'll be back in 5. Resume the recording. So I see some questions in the chat about, and I'm closing the chat again, about that piece here. So how do we fix things like the bump? And what if I didn't have an express monogram option? So just for giggles, totally not on topic for the instructions, but
Marianne does not see her screen.
okay.
Oh, yeah, I don't either.
Okay, you guys aren't seeing the screen. Hang on.
I had chat.
Share screen, share the screen, share. Yes?
Yes, starting, yes.
Yay! Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
We love technology. I don't really. I mean, I do, but like figuring out how to use Zoom is a thing all on its own. So if I didn't want to mess with the Express Monogram Wizard, maybe I had older software. There's nothing to stop you from just saying, you know what, I want this font. I want to be. I just want it in the center. I'm going to apply it. I'm going to drag it over here. I want a different font for my S and my R. Now, this, I'm going to put some spaces in between R. I'm going to leave it on that perfectly horizontal block. I'm going to apply that again. Well, that didn't work very well because I wasn't really paying attention to what my sizing was. So let's go back to my B. I'm going to right click on that and go to properties and change it. So we're going to make it 45. There's my bigger B. And then here's my S and R. I right click on that, go to properties, and here I might take out some of those spaces that are in between. Didn't take out enough spaces. But this is a good example of, again, where the S and the R are different. This R has all this sort of extra scroll work. And so I may have to play, if that's really what I want, I may have to play with that a little bit and offset. So that's it evenly centered. I'm going to use my arrows and just nudge that over. And so in theory, those are evenly spaced from, or close, from the B. But the R sticks out way to the right. This is where fonts can be funny. And this is also why, going back to the wizard, the fonts in the Express Monogram Wizard have been sort of selected. I remember when the Monogram Wizard first came out, they've been sort of pre-selected to behave a little bit better than others. And if you work with, so if I go into this drop down, watch, I'm going to scroll down. I apologize if I make you dizzy. Close your eyes for a second, maybe. See, if I look at this monogram category, this monogram category are letters that were designed and selected and kind of handpicked that they're going to kind of play nicely with one another. They're going to be, for the most part, a little more balanced, but that doesn't mean that I have to only use those letters. So there's definitely more than one way to do that. Now, Dan asked about, or somebody asked about, if we wanted to, and I'm going to delete this one. And I'm just right clicking to delete things. If I really wanted this, and I wanted to get rid of that bump, it's not as simple as it seems, unfortunately. So if I go to the Modify tab, you'll notice this is like, hey, it's going to lock everything in place. Well, can't really change it a whole lot as it is. If I zoom in, so I've gone to this little zoom to rectangle down here on the bottom right, and I'm going to zoom in here. I can literally move individual stitch points. I can select a stitch and I can go, okay, this guy needs to move up a little, just a little.
If you change the view to 2D with stitch point, you'll be able to see the stitch point.
View. Look at Karen. 2D. Okay.
Ah, where are the stitch points? Here we go.
So I can get in here and I can move them individually, but frankly, it is a pain in the patukas, to use a word that my mother used to use. And so I don't recommend it. If I'm bound and determined, I would almost rather you go into Ultra and just bring in a shape to make that applique out of. Or even better, since I'm here on this, I could go into my frames or my borders here. The other, option would be to find a letter that didn't do that and have, so we're just gonna pretend that this is one, and then I could potentially duplicate it. I could take one, if I had a different letter over here, and I could say, you know what, this S doesn't work, but the Q over here does. And I can go into modify and I can actually, and I apologize if I completely lose you guys on this one, but I could go in and I could take, a letter out. So what I've done is I've used my freehand select, which is always questionable with me, and I've cut that out, and you can see it's down here. And then I could go back home. I could cut whatever letter out is on the one that maybe had a smooth line, and then I could just paste it, and drop it into that spacing. Did that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, but if your initial starts with an S,
That's not going to solve the problem with that.
Well, this isn't if I go
Yeah.
S to S, but it would solve the problem potentially if I created one with my initials that I want and created a
Mhm.
second with a different set of letters that gave me the smooth line. That's the
Yeah.
part that I wasn't vocalizing as well as I wanted to. So there are ways. So I could play with, pick a different letter. But I also can look at this, and the S is, to me, if I look at this, the S looks wider. It looks like this is farther to the left than it is to the right. So, and that's just the nature of lettering. It can be somewhat problematic for various reasons. So no, I wouldn't drop an S on top of an S, but I might have put a Q over there, and I might take the Q out and substitute in an S if it eliminated the bumps. But I don't know about you guys, but I have some bumps on me, so it's just part of the course. Okay. Anybody completely done with me for the night? I wouldn't really blame you.
that would also be kind of fun, like making gifts and monogram as there's a set of tabs.
Yeah, you could find a template that you like, a base, to then continue to make changes. But if I went that way, honestly, I would probably
Go with the
start,
frame,
yeah, I would start with a frame.
find one I like and then put in the letters.
Exactly. And if I have Ultra, I might go ahead and, if I wanted a very specific shape, I might go ahead and digitize a shape. And speaking of letters and shapes and things, remember that if I go back to the letter tab, I have all these different, so right here I have kind of a diamond monogram. So if I went SBR and selected my diamond shape and applied it, and here I can play with my angles a little bit and my letters modify with me. That was no good. That's what I was trying to do there. But see, this B looks weird. It's all on the left-hand side because that R is so big. But there's nothing, play with it. This doesn't have to be, there's no right or wrong to embroidery for the most part. I say as Barbie, who does commercial embroidery, sits on the other side of the room. But there's nothing wrong with what you want to make out of it. So play with all of the controls that you have at your disposal. And if you don't like what it looks like, just don't stitch it out. The worst that you've done is spend some time learning and working with the software. The best that you've done is, learned a new technique or learned a new skill or found out that, oh, if I push that, this is what happens. Nothing wrong with any of those.
So now at this point, if you were to go over to spacing and change that,
If
that's gonna do it on both the S and the R.
I right click and I go, yep. So my size, my gap, my design shape, my spacing.
It
Well-
won't just let you do the space between.
No, if I wanted to play with the spacing between either one, I'd have to set them all individually here on my letter tab. In the wizard, come on. It needs a little push to get started. In the wizard, I have on my full letter tab, I have this spacing between left and right that are separate. So it's different controls in different places. And I can load 3 completely individual letters and just move them around willy-nilly if I want, or 2, or I always wanted to know, does anybody out there have a hyphenated last name and get married to somebody else with a hyphenated last name? What do? That's a lot of initials.
Don't get anything monogram.
Don't get anything monogram. Somebody said you use one from each. Then never mind. Anyway, off topic. So let's play a little bit more. We're going to go back to home and we're going to do file and new. I'm not saving anything that was there. And let's go to a larger hoop. So we're going to change our hoop once again. Universal. And this time let's go to 260 by 200. That's universal large hoop 3. Now why the first ones were called squares and these aren't called rectangles is beyond me. But, that's what they said. So that's what we're going to do. Make sure that we're natural. So this is going to be a taller hoop than it is wider. We're good. Okay. And then let's go ahead and play with, we worked with wizards. We play with super designs. So we talked about super designs before. So let's look at all of them, keeping in mind that I have ultra. So I have more than someone who has embroidery or extra. Okay. And that's my animals category. Here's my all, so I can see everything. It's going to take a minute for my computer to populate. I'm asking it to look for multiple pictures. So this is everything that we have. I happen to be a fan of these two right here, the little sun and the little moon. and you would know that if you've been in the store, we have about 4 or 5 celestial sun and moon collections in the store now. But what we're going to look for is hearts. So again, they're categorized in such a way that they're alphabetical. I will tell you that all these ones with the blocks make really cute pieces to do like baby quilts. Just not that I do anything baby. Barbie's probably rolling her eyes at me because I don't talk about babies very often. But, so I'm going to go down to find hearts. Well, forget it. I don't want to go through all that. So let's go to categories. That'll take me forever. And hearts. So I can narrow that down a little bit. Now I've only got 3 options of hearts. So I'm going to go to heart 2. And we're going to pick this. Actually, hearts 1. But heart 2 and hearts 1. This is fill in borders. Okay, so you see I've got all that information. I can play with the size. I can also play with the aspect ratio or the proportions. So let's go ahead and set this to something a little bit smaller, a 30mm heart. I look at my stitch type. I can satin column or pattern fill. Okay, we can change the pattern fill. I showed that just a little bit ago. Here's all the different patterns. So if you do have Design Creator, you have access to all of these pattern fills within Design Creator. So I can pick a pattern fill that I like. I can go ahead and play with the angle. I can play with the underlay if I want. If I know I'm going to stitch on something that's stretchy, we know that embroidery designs stitch differently on different types of fabrics. So we have a compensation option. I have a density. I even have something called gradient. Now, I haven't really shown this a whole lot before, but I can actually, I'm going to show it because why not? So I can transition my colors. This is, again, not in the instructions, but I just want you to see what it does. Why did I not take my red? Okay. And apply that heart, and do you see how it fades in and out of colors? So just for giggles, let's zoom in on this. Not in the instructions to do the gradient. But do you see how they kind of blended in and out? This works really well for sunrises and sunsets and things when you're working with fills like that.
Bonnie,
Yes,
change
ma'am.
your view back to 3D.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
3D. And there's my fill in the background as well. Now, let's go back to Super Designs. I'm going to delete this because since I'm showing you the gradient, I might as well tell you a little bit more. With this gradient, you can kind of play with where the colors transition and also how much of one color you have versus the other. So the top controls are kind of where it starts to change, and the bottom controls are where each color is in full. That's kind of the short version of that. I'm gonna actually turn gradient off because it's not really supposed to be here because it's just a little confusing. And let's reapply that heart. So you can see there, it's a little easier to see the fill pattern that I chose. My colors here. Now I can obviously change my color. If I want it to look more like a St. Patty's, that looks very St. Patty's to me. I've got my green St. Patty's hearts. If I'm happy with what I've got, I'm going to zoom back to my hoop. So I'm going to come down to this bottom toolbar, zoom to fit. That's going to fit back to my hoop. And we talked about one of the wizards, and we've talked about Encore before, but let's Encore again. Encore in a circle. Now, the heart is the same left and right, so it frankly doesn't matter if I mirror my layout or not. I can decide how many repeats I want. So I'm going to put 24 in. That's a lot of hearts. Do I want to group them or not group them? I do want them all to kind of come together and preview what that looks like. Okay, that is way too many. Now I could drag this in. And I just want to kind of point out the points are pointing to the center. If I drag it all the way inside out, oh, it didn't flip. Well, in the past, it used to flip. But this is too many. It's not going to work for this size hoop. It might work if I have a majestic hoop or a grand dream hoop. So let's change that to 8 and preview it again. I don't think that's quite enough. So for me, I'd want to be somewhere in the middle for the most part. Okay, but we can go ahead in here and we can, whoops, I grabbed the wrong piece. We can drag this, again, bring it back in. We bring it a whole lot closer. And I can turn it into an oval by grabbing this additional control on the side. So we can make our own frames out of other pieces. I'm happy with this. Works for me. Apply it. I can still see all of those squares ghosting around each of those individual pieces. They're all still individual colors. Let's go back home. I kind of want this right like it is, so let's restrict this group. And let's make some changes if we want. Okay, we're good here. I'm going to tab. Let's mirror image this guy inside out. Tab, mirror image him inside out. I don't know why you would want to do this. I don't write these instructions. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with being able to make changes. I can undo the restriction. I can drop, now I have my S over here, so I can go ahead and drop my S right into the center if I want. I could add a monogram or a letter or a series of letters from the lettering tab. So we can really absolutely play with this. I'm happy with it. Okay, we're good. I want the heart. I want a single initial here. I can save this. I can export it. I can print the template. I can send the picture to somebody. All of the things that we've already talked about. Any questions? I see it blink every so often. You guys, I did tell you that I'm talking about all the things I talked about last time, right? Which I didn't really mean to, but this gives you a lot more detail. So let's go ahead and play with a different hoop. So we're going to go home, well, file, I can go home, file, and new. And I'm not going to save this. You can. Let's change the hoop once more. And because of the technique that they're showing, if you are a Viking or Pfaff owner, you can go ahead and select your brand. And I want to select an endless hoop. Now there are 3 different endless hoops that have existed over the years. The first one was back when the Designer 1, the Designer SE were out. It is 170 by 100. It's the same size as the mid-size hoop. Then when the machines came out with the deluxe stitch system and they recommended using the sensor Q-foot, they came out with the endless hoop 2. And the difference is literally 10 millimeters. So if I look at the 2 in the list, endless hoop is 170 by 100. Endless 2 is 180 by 100. The difference is the space to accommodate the sensor Q-foot. That's the only reason that that hoop is bigger. If you have an endless hoop 1 and you want to use it on a machine that has a deluxe stitch system or a thread portioning, I think is what the Pfaff is called. I have to translate, sorry. you can turn the deluxe stitch system thread portioning off and use a non hopping foot. Now, Sensor Q is the Viking name. The FOF name is eluding me at the moment. Sensormatic, I think. It's a hopping embroidery foot versus a floating foot. So those are the two differences there. There also is, when we started to work with the bigger machines, the Mega Endless Hoop, which is much, much bigger. It's 260 by 150. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that one just because I can. I'm going to rotate it just so you can see things a little bit better. I'm going to say okay, and then I'm going to zoom out a smidge because now Brother and Baby Lock have what are called border hoops. They work in similar ways. What we have is a hoop that has a hinge on one side. When it's connected on the machine, what you see at the top of my screen is actually to the right. And it's basically a clamp. It locks down. This is not like a traditional hoop where one piece goes into the other. They actually come down and compress on top of one another. There usually is a layer of foam to help kind of hold things in place. This does not work well for high density designs. So if you have a high density design and you want to use this kind of a system, you need to stabilize really, really well. And the other thing, if you ever use an endless hoop, that is wildly important is that you mark a straight line down the whole piece. Do not go to the beach for the weekend and use an air erasable pen and mark that straight line, because by the second day when you are trying to finish that, your line has almost disappeared. Ask me how I know. That was fun. But I think that finished sample lives here in the store. So, okay. We've got the same kind of a concept. We've got a center grid, a vertical line. It's lovely here because I can see all my alignment tools. Does not work once we add fabric in here. The Brother and Baby Lock hoops have clamps on both sides and are metal. The Husqvarna Viking and FOF hoops have a clamp on just one end of it, and they are a composite hoop, just for comparison's sake. So let's go ahead and add a design to our hoop. So I'm going to insert, because that's my default that I prefer. I want to go ahead back into stitch 2. So I'm going to go to my sort of address bar up here and click on stitch 2. I am looking for the folder that says frames and borders. Of course, they're alphabetical, so frames and borders. I double click to open it. And then there is some stuff going on in here. Our instructions tell us to look for the flower scroll. Okay, so the fish would work really well in our horizontal position. If I wanted something like the flower border, I'm just going to open it so you see it's vertical. No worries. If my hoop is on screen horizontally, I move it horizontally. There's nothing wrong with either. That's not what I want. I want, according to my instructions, frames and borders. So now not all of these work beautifully for endless because obviously some of them are frames and not borders. What do I feel like I missed it? I did. Oh, here we go. Flower scroll. Okay. So here I've got a very pretty design. It looks very heirloom. I think it would look really cute with a monogram in the middle, but you know. And I want to go ahead and make this endless. I want it to have a line so that it repeats over and over and over again. I can do this with the existing design. So if I remove that box from around it, but that usually requires more math than I want to do. And it requires me to put a whole lot more markings on whatever item I'm working with. So I want the software to help me and make life a little bit easier. I'm going to go into my wizard. I'm going to tell it to make this design endless. Now, this is asking me within the endless, which way am I moving my fabric? Am I going to move my fabric left to right in relation to what I'm looking on screen? Am I going to move my fabric up and down? So I'm going to cancel this. I'm just going to go back home and I'm going to change my hoop to natural, like it would be on the screen, and go back into that wizard so you can kind of see the difference. Okay. So I have to make some decisions about how this goes, how I want it to be. I don't want it to go that way. I actually want it to, I'm going to undo. So I'm going to go back home and rotate just because I can. Endless. And so I'm going to move this up and down. And do you see how the fabric direction changed based on the orientation of my hoop? So it is pretty smart. The next piece here is my end markers. If I do a little corner, and some of you may have bought designs and it does a weird little stitch in like the outside borders, and you're like, why is it doing a little, L, or why is it stitching a couple of stitches off in the middle of nowhere? They are designs that are probably meant to be endless or connective. And so I get some extra stitches for that. I like corner markers, but they can be problematic on fabric that shows needle strikes. So satins, anything that's going to show where the needle went in, I might actually just do a single stitch because then I have an exact position for where that needle went down. And with our newer machines with design positioning, or my lack of FOF translation is showing precise positioning. It's what it is on the FOF. I can literally move my needle to that exact place and put my needle down in that exact position. The tie off will tie a little knot and get that little lump. Some people are good with it. Some people aren't. Tie offs are great if you're not going to be working with it again right away. Or a line will literally sew a line across. So you sometimes have to evaluate what fabric you're using. And where do I want my markers? Do I want my markers at the left and on the bottom? Do I want, just opposite corners? I put my markers everywhere because if I only have one marker, sometimes I get a little crooked. So if I have both, I can really pin both positions down. Now the gap is great if I want to create some space in between these two here. Okay, so just to show you really clearly, that's a 10 millimeter gap. That still fits within this hoop. A different hoop, it might not. And I can create an endless design and use it with another hoop. It's just a little bit harder. The new metal hoops with the magnets do also work really well for this process. So I get to play with all of those. And I can also just, so I can make my gap a negative number and they actually overlap. So there are some designs where, let's just see what it does if I make it a negative 25. And see, then I create another design element where I get this sort of additional, almost looks like a bow that's hanging down. So none of them are right or wrong controls. Then if I'm happy with that, I say, okay. And here now I've got this design. This is my overall design, but I can still see the ghosting of the boxes underneath.
Okay, so if you have that overlap, that little bow in the middle,
Mhm.
is it going to be smart enough to take away the extra stitches?
No.
Okay.
No. So with this overlap, it's not going to take away the extra stitches. And the reason is because this portion at the top of one and the bottom of the other is going to have to be stitched twice. So if I really wanted that to overlap, I might pay very close attention to where these are. Actually, that came pretty close. So I may try and minimize the overlap stitch as much as possible by playing with how big that gap was. Okay, so what I did was I just zoomed in, did my zoom to rectangle and zoomed into that space to get closer. So now we've got all of these controls. I built all those into my design, and it'll make it much, much easier to stitch out when I'm ready. Okay, if I'm happy with this, I can save it, I can export it. Not a problem for me to do both. Okay, any questions about that? This is a lot of sort of smaller pieces, getting you a little more familiar with the different components of this module. Part of me wants to sort of save this. I'm going to save it. Again, just like with the monogram wizard, if it wasn't exactly the way I wanted it to be, I may have to go back in and redo it. But I'm going to call this endless endless. Barbie says endless flower scroll. There we go. That's y'all. I can spell, but I can't type. And I may make a note about the -25 overlap, but you know where an even better place for me to do that is, and I haven't talked about this yet. Over here on the right hand side is notes and settings. So I can go into my pencil and I can manually type in whatever note I need there. And okay. Did I not add it? No, I didn't. Add. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Dummy. Why is it not showing up? Hey, Miss Karen, are you still there? She might have left us. Well, it should put it in there, but it didn't.
Sorry,
That's okay.
I had to mute myself.
Why is it not adding my note?
Oh, yeah.
I'll come back
Yeah.
to it. Because this is not the place that I should be doing that. So I'm way
Let
off anyway.
me,
Right?
yeah, let me
Look at it.
get mine out because yeah, it works.
I know
Don't
it
you have,
does.
don't you have to go to the pencil that's there?
I did.
It didn't work.
I
It
did.
may have something to do with saving it too, if I remember right. I could be wrong.
Oh, you know what? That may be a very valid point. Okay. Hang on. Let's try. If I combine it. Okay. So when I combined it, it automatically put in some notes. Yep. And then there's my notes that I put in as well. Yep, it was because it wasn't a combined design, so it couldn't apply it to both of them until they were all one. And so here, once I combined it, color sort it. Now, since I'm talking about endless, I'm turning off the 4 colors, which were the design. And I'm going to change this one to hopefully something that shows up on screen really well. Okay, so the red. So you see, this is where I've actually got corners. And with corners, I can zoom in here and I can actually see my stitches. And I'm going to undraw them and see what happens as it stitches. And it will get closer, closer, closer. You'll see this come in and actually stitch that little corner for me at the very end. I also could run it through Stitch Player. There it goes. And so what this does is it allows me to line up this corner here with, scroll up, the next one, it'll be this point right here. So that's a great way to see that alignment. I must have left line on. Bet I left line on. which is generally not the way I want it to be. But with endless designs, people very often say, what is this other weird thing? Other thing that is really important with an endless design is that you pay attention to which way you're moving your fabric so that the design stitches appropriately, because it does this alignment stitch last. So if you start at the wrong end of the thing that you're embroidering on, you have to, it's much easier these days to jump forward, but you have to jump to the last stitch, stitch the alignment tools, and then go back to the beginning with every time you do a design. Does that sound like I've done that before? Because I have. So we've got some controls there. We are at 8:53. So I'm going to quickly walk you through the last little component, which is creating a quilt label with an applique component to it. So everybody ready? I'm going to do this relatively quickly. I'm going to do File and New. Going to change my hoop. I would not create a quilt label. Who am I talking about? I don't create quilt labels. Okay, let's just be really honest. I wouldn't create a quilt label. Yes, I could just leave it right there. But I wouldn't create a quilt label this big. But we can go ahead into our lettering to add whatever lettering we want. I'm just going to call this testing 1, 2, 3. Now, if I want multiple lines of text, the control button on my keyboard, you've noticed, is very important. Control button held down and press the enter. This will be next line, control enter, and again. Most of the time, if we're creating quilt block labels, if you're creating quilt block labels, you really want them to be easily read. The horizontal block works most of the time. Pick whatever font you like. I'm going to let this default out to what I had here. I can play with the size. I can play with the gap. I can say, you know what? We're good here. Let's go ahead and apply this. So I can play with the sizing a little bit within individual letters if I want to load them separately. I could add a big monogram to some of this if I wanted. I can adjust all of my spacing. It's entirely up to you how you want to do that. I'm looking at these instructions and they are all kinds of backwards, but that's okay. So if I want to change anything here, I can right click, go into my properties. I've got the ability to do all of these different changes, color sort, change my shape, change my gap, change my sizing. In the interest of life being easier and faster, I'm going to go ahead and let these continue to be. And I can turn this into an applique pretty easily by going to my applique. Express applique. No applique stitches have been found. What did I do? Let's add a border. Rounded corners. There we go. Add an applique. Apply. And because I had my lettering selected, you saw that it did a quick snap to what was already existing. If I'm not super thrilled with all my lettering, I can go back in and change it. But if I look at my colors here, you'll see that I have my, let's see, I'm going to go to modify. Yes. I go home. So the software is always really smart and yells at me. I'm going to go into modify. There's my placement stitch. I am not sure. Karen, do you know? Is there a stop?
I'm sorry.
Is there a stop built into the applique?
A gap?
A stop.
Yes.
A color stop. Okay.
Yes.
So there should be. So
It will stop. It won't change. Yeah.
That's what
It stops.
So ready? Let's go to design player for this. And I want to let you see what's going to happen here. I'm going to go a little faster. So most appliques that we're used to that come from other companies come with a 3-step applique. It's a placement stitch and then a color change, although usually we don't change the thread. And then a tack down stitch, another color change, although we very often don't change the thread. And then a satin stitch or a finished stitch, whatever the decorative stitch is on the end. But Viking, and they've done this with cut work as well over the years, they add stops. Now, this is where it can get a little tricky if you bring in designs from other companies where they didn't have color changes. Sometimes they have all the same color, but they'll say have the same block color in there 3 times in a row, and we merge. So it's important to know kind of where we've started. Okay, and so here we see it said, hey, I put a stop in there. So, and you can see that in the player. I don't see any additional stitches because they're stitching on top of the other. I'm impatient, so I'm going to go faster. I put my fabric down, the background changed. Again, stop, cut around the applique. And so this is where the design player actually shows us pieces that we don't necessarily see if we only put things on our machine. Again, this works with an applique created in this software. Those controls do not show up if I bring in an applique from an outside source. So something to kind of keep in mind. There are more steps to this label. I don't know about you guys, but I'm about done with that for the night. And what I will tell you is that it involved playing with the different pieces and all these different envelope shapes, and loading things individually. So if I, just for giggles, I'm going to undo and undo and undo. There we go. Load them individually, apply, and you see that each letter now has a separate control around it. So I can do all these fun things with each individual letter if I wanted to. They're all separate designs. So if I wanted to change the size of that first piece, I could go ahead and play with that. So things to play with, things to keep in mind. On that note, my head is fried. 2 hours, I know for me, staring at the computer, 2 hours for you guys staring at the computer is a lot. I will try and get this chat. Oh, let's stop the screen share. There we go. I've done endless for the multi-magnetics. Okay, Karen. Yay! Anna,
Made it through.
there's a border hoop because we sell Brothers here as well. There is a border hoop for the Baby Lock and Brother 10 needles if that's what you have. So, and that hoop loads horizontally, it attaches differently. But yes, there is a border hoop. Oh, cable design not centered. We'll have to play with that one later. I'm looking at some of the questions. Okay. So any quick questions before we go for the evening? We got it to work. Line of lettering. Patricia, I don't know if you go by Patty or Patricia. The control button on the keyboard and then hit the enter will give you those multiple lines of text. Barbie answered that. Yay.
Yeah, I have a Mac. No, it's never the same.
Well, you know what? If you buy the download instructions,
Okay.
because what's uploaded is PC. So anybody else who has a Mac, if you buy those, you can reply to you'll get a receipt, reply to that and say, hey, Bunny, I need the Mac version, and I can upload the Mac version.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Not everything that's on Mac is on a PC. I do not own a Mac, but we did give you guys in one of the previous emails the link to who would tell me the name again? Karen. Maggie,
What?
to Maggie's YouTube. Maggie has some math
Okay,
lessons.
my Sonnet Premier 2 Mac, no, PC and Mac users group.
Okay. And then she has YouTube videos, yes?
Yep, several.
Okay, but if you need me to send you that again, I don't have any problem with that.
Thanks.
Also with the downloads, because technology is obnoxious. Normally when you purchase, this is in case anybody hasn't gotten them, when you purchase something that's downloadable from our website, a little thing pops up right away on that screen where you have to click and download. If you for some reason have not gotten the lessons or you missed that download link, don't hesitate, just email me and be like, hey, I bought those lessons and I still don't have them.
Okay.
And we just will upload them to you manually. Technology is not always any of our friends. So, okay, we are scheduled again in 2 weeks. If you cannot make class, the class will go up to YouTube sometime in the next 48 hours. I'm not honestly not sure. It may be Sunday, so it may be more like 72 right now.
Okay. Yeah. The Mac users out there, I text or put something in the chat, but I use a Mac and everything that we did today, you can do in a Mac.
Yeah. It's
No
just,
problem.
it's just really tricky finding it at times.
It's arranged different. It's what you get used to. I have a harder time finding stuff in a PC than I do in a Mac.
Yeah, Karen's more of a Mac user.
Yeah, so it's what you get used to. But the lesson plans are in a PC or in a Mac.
Yeah, I always know if it's up on a PC, it's down on a Mac, and if it's left, it's right. Pretty much it's there. It's just, the way place where I didn't think it would be. It's the opposite of where I expect it to be. But okay, on that lovely note, I'm going to leave you guys with one other thing. I know I always talk about buying things from your local shop. In the off chance that you have a need to peruse our website, you may or may not be on our mailing list. So right now we are offering 20% all of the fabrics in store using the coupon code Make Shelf Space, all one word, all uppercase, because a whole lot of shipments of fabric came that have been delayed at once. So if y'all need some fabric, by all means, buy some fabric. There's also a 50% off sale that runs for a bunch of things that runs through April. No, it runs through May 8th. That's for my 50th birthday. So on that note, everybody have a good one. If you need anything, feel free to email us. It does sometimes take me a couple days to get back to you. I apologize, but that's just the nature of the beast around here. If I could clone myself, or if Karen would move to the right coast, that would be good. Okay, on that note, everybody have a really great night, and hopefully we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wait.
Thank you.
You are very welcome, Betty Ann. Look, I know that voice. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.